Hunting Trophies Import Prohibition Bill.
Before we begin, I have a few preliminary reminders for the committee. Obviously, please switch electronic devices to silent. No food or drink permitted during sittings of the committee except for the water provided on the tables. And Hansard colleagues would be grateful if members could email their speaking notes to hansardnotes@parliament.uk. My selection and grouping for today's meeting is available online and in the room. No amendments have been tabled to this bill. We will have a single debate on all of the clauses in the bill. And obviously we'll begin with clause 1, with which it will be convenient to consider clauses 2 to 4 stand part. The question is that clause 1 stand part of the bill. I call Henry Smith.
So Mark, it is an honour to serve under your chairmanship, and I'm very grateful for the support today of honourable and right honourable members from across the House who are serving on this committee. The Hunting Trophies Import Prohibition Bill that we are considering today proposes to ban British hunters from bringing home the bodies and body parts of endangered species that they have killed. It is the bill that has the support of the government and all parties across the House, for which I am very grateful. Outside of Parliament, a ban enjoys the support of 86% of voters and has been reflected in the supportive media coverage. The UK's leading wildlife and animal welfare charities have also given it their backing, as have some of the world's leading conservationists, public figures and African leaders. An extensive public consultation was held by the Department for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, and over 44,000 people and entities took part, including representatives of African communities and scientists. Some 9 out of 10 of the submissions received by the government supported the action that we are discussing today. So Mark, it is worth... I'd be delighted.
Thank honourable friend for giving way, and that very long list of support, including most significantly the government. Can he tell us what assurances he had from the government that they will help to facilitate the passage of this bill, not only through the Commons, but also through the other place, in order that it could become law in this session?
Well, I'm very grateful to that intervention from the Right Honourable Member for Worley, and I'd like to pay tribute to all of the work that he does. I know he's passionate on this issue. I've been very grateful for the support and advice that has been given to me by the government whips, and I am never complacent, but I have a significant degree of confidence that this bill has the support to go through not only this place but the other place as well.
Just on that point, I also share the concern that we do get this important bill through in this session, but does he agree with me that the government should be congratulated on such a strong record on enhancing animal welfare and rights? They supported my ban on glue traps last year, and I know there are so many other animal welfare issues that they do act really strongly on.
Well, I'm grateful again for that intervention from the Honourable Lady, and I'd like to commend her for the success she had in terms of the glue traps prohibition that she successfully secured last year. That's a significant win for animal welfare, and again is a list of quite a long agenda of bills that have become law and others that are shortly to become on the statute book from this government on animal welfare issues. And really, in answer to the Right Honourable Gentleman's point and the Right Honourable Lady's point, this House can help the passage of this bill. Hopefully it will be nominated for report stage and third reading on the Friday the 17th of March, excuse me, and therefore attendance to ensure that that bill has the support on the floor of the House on that date, if that indeed is the date for report and third reading, and if there were to be any divisions, would be a great help in ensuring that it passes the common stages and can go on to have plenty of time to go through the other place in time for this parliamentary sitting. I'd be delighted to.
I'm grateful to him for giving way. I note clause 4, subparagraph 2, states that sections 1 and 2 will come into force on a day as the Secretary of State may by regulations appoint. Has he received any assurance from the government that they will not unduly delay those parts of the bill coming into force? And if he is not able to answer that, perhaps the Minister, when she addresses the committee, could do so on that point.
My right honourable friend raises a very important point. I don't have a date because obviously we don't yet know when hopefully this bill will receive royal assent, but it is my understanding and belief that the government are committed to this legislation and will want to see it come into force at the earliest opportunity. And perhaps I could echo my right honourable friend's remarks in terms of seeking similar reassurances when the Minister responds at the end of this debate. Sir Mark, it is worth noting that a recent opinion poll shows almost 70% of South Africans believe that trophy hunting should be banned altogether. And we are not here to ban trophy hunting, though, even though we may wish we could do that. That is not our purpose or remit. The territorial extent of this legislation is, of course, Great Britain. We can, however, yes, indeed.
I'm very grateful to him for giving way, and I would like to offer my support for his work on this matter, and just also to pass on the good wishes of my constituents, many of whom have been deeply concerned about this issue for some time. I've had a great deal of correspondence about it, and they do appreciate the work he's doing. In terms of the territorial extent, I note obviously this is legislation that affects the UK. Has he had, perhaps he could update the committee on any discussions he'd had with the government about the government's plans for training Border Force staff in this matter, and what additional equipment they will have to scan for these items should some hunters quite wrongly try to bring this material into the UK in the future?
Well, I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for his support, and he's absolutely right. I think we've all been very much heartened by the encouragement from our constituents to make sure that this legislation gets onto the statute book. And for that, very grateful for the voluntary organisations who've been campaigning for many years on this issue for raising awareness and making sure that we here in Parliament are responding to that request. He raises a very important point about enforcement. We can pass all sorts of legislation in this place, and that is fine, but unless that legislation is enacted, as my right honourable friend mentioned, and then enforced, it has little effect. And it is a point I'm sure the Minister will have heard, and I will certainly pursue, that it's important that Border Force customs officials are aware of just how to spot how this ban might seek to be abused and circumvented by those who would wish to do that. Of course.
Well, thank the honourable member for giving way and congratulate him on the work he's done on this bill. Would he reflect that Border Force already enforce a range of obligations, for example, under CITES, and looking to prevent the import of banned items into the UK? So to extend this into ensuring illegal hunting trophies do not enter Great Britain should be something they should easily be able to build into their work.
Well, my honourable friend from Torbay raises a very important point that, yes, UK border officials and customs officials are very professional in terms of the way that they enforce the laws as they exist right now in terms of spotting and identifying where illegal items might be sought to be brought into the country. But of course I would encourage the Home Office to ensure that when this legislation hopefully makes it into law, that is very clearly understood by those officials who are securing our border. I'd be delighted to.
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman giving way, and my constituents too are passionate to see this come onto the statute book and so much more besides. But could he clarify the assurances he's had from government at a time when the Northern Ireland Protocol is being hotly debated, that there will be no leakage to the legislation that we're debating today, and to ensure there can be no imports into the UK of these trophies, or so-called trophies?
I'm grateful to the intervention from the Honourable Lady, and very much appreciative of the support of the people of York and of Crawley and throughout the country of this legislation. I wish the extent of this was the United Kingdom, but because of the Northern Ireland Protocol, that isn't possible at the moment. I will come on to address that later on when going into some of the details of the relevant clauses to that, but she raises a very important point. What we don't want is some sort of backdoor to allow I call them body parts, technically trophies from those endangered species hunted. We don't want to see them coming through essentially the back door through Northern Ireland. And as I say, I'll come on to talk a little bit more about that in a few moments' time. So Mark, we can send a very strong message to the world and show international leadership in the face of a global extinction crisis. We can stop British people killing the world's most endangered species for entertainment and for symbols, which some people sadly think represents an achievement that they can be proud of.
I know this bill is obviously about preventing imports of trophies into this country, but what he just said about showing leadership, there are actually companies, for example, there's a Danish company, I think it's Limpopo and Diana Holiday Tours, who are promoting hunting trips in Bedfordshire, I think it's on the Woburn estate, where you can pay up to £25,000 to shoot stags. So clearly it's an issue in terms of people from other countries coming to this country to do trophy hunting as well. So I hope that this does act as an influence on other countries to follow suit.
I'm grateful for that intervention from the Honourable Lady, and paid tribute to her last night in a different animal welfare debate in the main Commons chamber, and I'm happy to repeat my appreciation for all the work that she does in terms of highlighting animal welfare issues in Parliament. She's got a strong record of doing that. I wasn't aware of what I would describe very sorry example that she gives. Of course, this legislation is about preventing the importation of trophy hunting from endangered species, but I very much support her wider point that personally I find it abhorrent that people should be flying into this country to shoot stags, but obviously that is beyond the scope of this legislation. I'd be pleased.
Thank you very much. On a very similar vein to the Honourable Member, it says that trophies from captive bred animals are currently subject to less strict controls than wild animals, and an import permit is not required for trophies from captive bred animals of the Annex A and 6 Annex species, which is what we're looking at in this one. Can my honourable friend confirm that this is the trade in trophies from captive bred animals is also going to be part of this bill?
Yes, my honourable friend raises a very important clarification. I'm grateful for her doing that. I think essentially what she's referring to are these sort of canned hunting, as it's so called, experiences where just appallingly endangered species are bred purely to be in an enclosure to then be shot for some sort of entertainment by these trophy hunters. This legislation covers that. It is all endangered species as covered by CITES Annexes A and B, and it doesn't matter the the sorry and sad circumstances with which that animal is killed for a trophy, whether it be out in the bush or in the tundra in the case of polar bears, or whether it be in an enclosure. It covers both of those extents. So Mark, trophy hunting is, in the eyes of the vast majority of right-minded people, barbaric. There is simply no reasonable or plausible excuse for it. The science proves that it is cruel. Most animals shot by trophy hunters do not die clean, quick deaths. They die slowly and painfully, and many are lost by hunters as animals crawl into the bush after being hit in a desperate bid to avoid death. This bill makes an important contribution to tackling the conservation crisis before us, as species hunted for trophies are amongst those that have suffered the most dramatic declines. Big cats such as lions and leopards have seen their numbers fall by 90% in the last half-century, and Africa's 2 elephant species have just been declared endangered and critically endangered on the IUCN's Red List. Hippopotamus numbers have fallen significantly over the past decade, and there are now around 30,000 zebras left. I picked these species for particular mention for a reason. These 5 animals are classed as endangered by CITES and are the African species which British trophy hunters most like to shoot. They're not the only endangered or threatened animals killed by British hunters for souvenirs, however. Others include cheetahs that have vanished from 98% of their range, and which an estimated 6,500 remain. The black rhino, which is classed as critically endangered on the Red List, and of which just 3,000 are left in the wild. Polar bears, which I deliberately mention, as this legislation of course covers all endangered species, further to my honourable friend's point, regardless of where they may be in the world, not just of course Africa. There are believed to be only some 26,000 polar bears left in the wild, and over the past half-century, twice that number have been shot for their skins and for so-called sport. The extinction emergency before us is the result of many problems. Habitat destruction from human expansion, habitat degradation caused by climate change, persecution and poaching. But trophy hunting is making the struggle for survival an even more difficult one. So Mark, one of the threats facing species is virtually unique to trophy hunting, and that is the problem of artificial selection. Trophy hunters seek out and kill the biggest animals. They do this because they want the most impressive trophies to put on display, and because they help hunters win prizes and enter the record books of hunting groups such as Safari Club International. Scientists have found that lions have lost 15% of their gene pool over the last century. And they say that by killing just 5% of the best males that are left, that may be enough to push the species past the point of no return. Elephant tusks are getting smaller, and there are many more tuskless adult elephants than before. This means elephants are more likely to die each year as drought becomes more frequent, and elephants are finding it harder to search for water that may lie under dry riverbeds as a result. So Mark, humanity, I believe, has a duty to do everything it can to tackle these challenges. Trophy hunting is one thing that we can do something about now. The problems of feeding a growing African population are complex, but trophy hunting, however, is simply unnecessary and unconscionable. It does not feed hungry people, it does not clothe or provide fuel for people living in subsistence economies, and it is not an act of self-defense. Trophy hunting is the leisure activity of a tiny and mindless minority. It is completely alien to African or Inuit cultures and traditions, and unlike photo safaris and other forms of nature tourism, it brings a pittance into local communities and generates next to no revenues for wildlife conservation. So Mark, we are, I am pleased to say, not alone. The Australians, the French, even some American states have all brought in varying degrees of trophy hunting bans. The Dutch have introduced sweeping prohibitions, the Belgian Parliament has voted unanimously to implement identical restrictions, and the government of Finland in the last few weeks has announced plans to put in place a trophy hunting ban from outside of the European Union. We are on the right side of history. We're on the right side of public opinion, and we're on the right side of the people of Africa and elsewhere, where trophy hunters are robbing people of their and our natural heritage. And we are on the side of the world's wildlife that is today in crisis, and we must act now before it is too late. So, Mark, I therefore very much hope that this committee will give its strong support to the bill and urge colleagues in both houses to see that it passes all stages before the end of this parliamentary session, further to the honourable gentleman's points. And I very much hope that when it comes to the secondary legislation stage, the government will ensure the scope of this bill includes not just species listed in the Wildlife Trade Regulations Annexes A and B, but also those classed as near threatened and above on the IUCN Red List. This is key to ensuring that the bill accomplishes what has been the government and the public's aim, namely the toughest ban on hunting trophies in the world. So, Mark, just briefly, I would like to run through the 4 clauses and technically what they are designed to do. Clause 1 prohibits the importation of hunting trophies into Great Britain. Subsection 1 prohibits the import of hunting trophies into Great Britain of animals from certain species as set out in Clause 2, hunted after the prohibition comes into force, and that are being brought into Great Britain by or on behalf of the hunter bringing it home. Subsection 2 defines hunting trophies. The effect of this definition is consistent with the internationally agreed definition used in the UK's current controls. There are no exemptions to the import ban, which would see permit imports of hunting trophies meeting the conditions as set out in subsections 1 of 2 of this clause. Items that are not hunting trophies, according to these conditions, will continue to be covered by the UK's current controls. Subsection 3 disapplies the current controls on the import of hunting trophies under the UK Wildlife Trade Regulations for items in the scope of this prohibition, and subsection 4 defines the Wildlife Trade Regulations, which are a retained law implementing CITES. Clause 2 sets out the species in scope of the imports prohibition. Subsection 1A applies the import prohibition to all animal species listed on Annexes A and B of the Wildlife Trade Regulations, with exemptions made by the Secretary of State through regulations. Subsection 1B applies the import prohibition to other animal species as can be specified in regulations. The rest of the clause gives more information about these regulations. Subsection 2 sets out standard technical provisions about what regulations are able to do to make different provision for different purposes or consequential, incidental, supplementary, transitional, transitory or saving provisions. Subsection 3 sets out that these regulations are to be made by statutory instrument. Subsection 4 sets out that the first regulations made under 1B, in effect the first listing of additional species, is subject to the affirmative procedure, and this ensures wider parliamentary scrutiny. Subsection 5 sets out that further regulations are to be subject to the negative procedure. This is in line with how annexes to the Wildlife Trade Regulations are updated. For example, when new species are added to CITES appendices in order to regulate their international trade. So, Mark, Clause 2 sets out how a provision on imports to Great Britain will work in relation to Northern Ireland, taking into account the unfettered access principles in the UK Internal Market Act 2020. Subsection 1 makes clear that movements of trophies from Northern Ireland to Great Britain will be covered by the ban, and subsection 2 makes clear that the same sanctions would apply under the Customs and Excise Management Act 1979. Subsection 3 exempts qualifying Northern Ireland goods from the import prohibition as defined in subsection 4, with reference to the European Union Withdrawal Act 2018, in line with the UK's Internal Market Act 2020. Qualifying goods currently include 1. Northern Ireland processed products, and 2. Goods that are present in Northern Ireland and are not subject to any customs supervision, restriction or control which does not arise from the goods being taken out of the territory of Northern Ireland or the territory of the European Union. Part 2 of this definition of qualifying goods includes hunting trophies from all Annex A species and 6 from Annex B species that have been issued a UK import permit to be lawfully imported into Northern Ireland. These qualifying trophies would result in a CITES permit to be moved from Northern Ireland to Great Britain. And finally, Sir Mark, Clause 4, subsection 1 of this clause sets out the territorial extent of the bill. Subsection 2, 3 and 5 of this clause sets out when and how the provisions in the bill come into force. And subsection 4 provides powers for the Secretary of State to make transitional or saving provisions in regulations that commence provisions in the bill. Subsection 5 provides that the short title of the bill will be the Hunting Trophies Import Prohibition Act once it receives royal assent. Sir Mark, I commend this bill to the committee.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Smith. I call Sammy Wilson.
Thank you, Sir Mark. First of all, I welcome this bill and congratulate the member on getting it to this stage so far, and I hope that the government will give it its support to ensure that it finds its way through the full passage in both the House of Commons and in the upper chamber. I think that there are two things I would say, first of all, in relation to the necessity of this bill. Public opinion is clearly in favour of this. 86% of those who are surveyed believe that there should be an immediate import ban. And I think that that can't be ignored. I think that secondly, in the countries where these animals are often hunted, there is now a growing consensus amongst politicians, the population, academic researchers, environmentalists, that this trade is not good for their country. It is not good for the animals, and especially those that are under threat, and that it doesn't even contribute economically in the way in which many of those who would support this trade and these activities would claim that it does. Thirdly, and it's quite clear now from the figures which are available and which have been already quoted, I'm not going to go through them all again, that many of the animals which are hunted are being hunted close to extinction anyway. And I will give way, yes.
First of all, can I congratulate the Honourable Member for bringing this before us, and of course the Right Honourable Member for all you I know has been working on this for a long period of time, and I completely support what the Honourable Gentleman says, but would he also agree with me in relation to the question of potential extinction? Wouldn't organisations like Safari International just be better being honest about their position, that they just like shooting and killing things, rather than what they appear to be doing is dressing this up as some sort of conservation effort on their part, with the sort of killing of the animals irrelevant to that bizarrely to that aim?
And the member's absolutely right, because of course there's no evidence that this has led to conservation and has led to protection of the animals. In fact, if we look at it, as a result of this trophy hunting, elephants are now in a critical situation as far as their numbers are concerned. Lions, very often those that are hunted after they've been bred in captivity, so there's not even enough out in the wild any longer, and the numbers are down to about 200,000. Leopards have fallen from 700,000 in 1961, I think it was, to 50,000 today, so there's no evidence there of conservation. And the same with hippos. The hippopotamuses, the population down by 20%. So, I mean, this idea that somehow or other hunting animals helps their conservation is just not proven by the facts. And yet, despite this, and despite the clear threat, we find that the number of trophies coming into the United Kingdom, the trade hasn't declined. It's increased substantially, from 17 per year in 1981 to 300 in the year before the pandemic. So there doesn't even appear to be any restraint on those who are carrying out these activities in the face of the fact that there are fewer animals available. And the fourth thing is that I don't think there's even an economic case for it. It's significant that those countries which, like Tanzania, which are now banning this, are getting far, far more money per hectare than what they from nature tourism than they would have got from the hunting of animals. The figure which has been given is $14 per hectare, as opposed to 20 cents per hectare for those for when tourism was centred on hunting wild animals. So I think that the case is unassailable. I've got two concerns about the bill. One which is totally outside the control of our government or whatever. I've read through, and I don't want to go through some of the comments that have been made by the hunters. But, you know, we've all received a briefing. There are some people who do this for pure pleasure. They you know, one comment, you know, was sat, had a few beers, and then went out and shot monkeys. Or it's lovely to hear that smack of the bullet hitting the animal. Now, I don't know whether a trophy, the banning the importation of the trophies, is ever going to stop people like that from going out and hunting them. The only difference is they can't bring the heads or the parts of the body home. And I think that, you know, and this is where, and this is totally outside the remit of the bill, the remit of the discussion here today, but we do need to look at ways in which we offer economic alternatives to those countries that still allow people to come out and make a holiday out of killing animals. But that's outside the scope of this bill. I do have some concern about the bill itself, though. As already been alluded, this only refers to Great Britain. It can't refer to Northern Ireland because of the Northern Ireland Protocol. And the fact that Northern Ireland still remains under EU law, and if the EU allows the importation of trophies, then the importation of those trophies has to be allowed into Northern Ireland. And I have concerns. Whilst many of those who go out trophy hunting probably don't have homes in Northern Ireland, don't have places to display them in Northern Ireland, I'm still concerned, and I don't even know many people in Northern Ireland are engaged in trophy hunting and bringing trophies home. But I have some fears that Northern Ireland could become the depository for some of these items. And secondly, despite the assurances which the member has given about the isolation or the ability to ensure that Northern Ireland does not become a conduit for these trophies, Clause 3 of the bill makes it quite clear that they can't be, the trophies can't be imported from Great Britain into Northern Ireland, and I believe that there's the ability to stop that, and that they can't be removed from Northern Ireland to Great Britain. But here's the problem. I don't want to see any more restrictions on trade between Northern Ireland and Great Britain, or Great Britain and Northern Ireland. But there's a free flow of goods from Northern Ireland through to the United Kingdom, or to GB, sorry. There aren't any checks, and there shouldn't be any checks on internal trade. But while Northern Ireland remains under the protocol, and while this law can no longer cannot apply to trophies being brought into Northern Ireland through the EU, then there is always the danger of it being used as a back door. And I think that there needs to be, I mean, the obvious answer for that is for the government in the negotiations that's engaging in at present to deal with the issue. That the laws which apply in the rest of the United Kingdom apply fully in Northern Ireland, and laws which we do not want to apply in the United Kingdom don't apply in Northern Ireland either. And I think that it is important that that issue is addressed. Another incentive, Sir Mark, I know that you will stop me if I deviate too far on this particular issue, but it's only yet another example of where the position which we have remained in as a result of the inadequate negotiations and Brexit actually impinge on the rest of the United Kingdom. I mean, sometimes people think this is only a Northern Ireland issue. It's not only a Northern Ireland issue, because it influences and it affects and sometimes makes less effective laws which we want to apply in the whole of the country, because there's the loophole of what happens in Northern Ireland. So I hope that the Minister will address what can be done. As I've said, I think that while the protocol is in place, it's going to be very difficult, but I hope that thought will be given to this issue, because we do not want to become the channel through which a trade which is illegal is able to continue and give way.
I think the Honourable Member is making a really interesting point, and I look forward to seeing what the Minister has to say on that point. But he's quite right about this could act as mean that Northern Ireland is acting as a backdoor. But one of the other ways of sort of tackling this is to try to persuade EU countries to implement bans. And I know that Finland has passed a law that will ban trophy hunting imports of endangered species from this June. So does he agree with me that we need to encourage other EU countries to go down that same path?
Yes, I do. And I mean, I think that there's an international battle to be had here. If we really believe that this kind of activity is endangering animals, then I think, just as I said, that we should be encouraging African nations and other, and it's not only African nations, don't forget, there's 30 countries across the world where animals which are endangered are hunted, and hunted almost to extinction. So I think that there is a need to, first of all, try and persuade countries that there's an alternative to this kind of trade, and secondly, those that are allowing the trophies to come in and therefore encouraging the trade, to try and persuade them of the views which we are talking about today and which are encapsulated in this bill, so that there's a whole approach to that. And I'd be more than happy if instead of Northern Ireland having to comply to EU law, the EU decided it was going to comply to UK law. I think that would be a gain for us. And of course, I've no doubt that the population in the UK, their views are no different from the population in many other countries as well, who probably would share our opposition to this. So, Sir Mark, I want to give my full endorsement to the bill. I want to congratulate the member on pushing the bill to this point, but I'd like to hear from the Minister how the loophole which still exists and will exist until the protocol is dealt with can be handled.
It's a pleasure to see you in the chair, Sir Mark. I want this bill to proceed, so I'll be brief. I congratulate our honourable friend for bringing this forward. It's now some 11 years ago that I backed the wildlife protection campaign launched in this House. It was then a new campaign by the World Society for the Protection of Animals, and the theme was to stamp out the international trade in endangered and vulnerable species. And I was shown a selection of items which the authorities had seized, amongst them some elephant tusks, which were under police guard because of their value. But it was something else which shocked me the most when I was handed a particular trinket. This was not a carving or a sculpture, but a stuffed tiger cub, which has been slaughtered at 10 days of age and mounted on a plinth for the sole idea of being a decoration that's on someone's mantelpiece. It was killed precisely for that purpose. The baby cub trophy was seized during a police raid in the UK. I was horrified and repulsed by this, Sir Mark, and by, as I am now, by the knowledge that there are people out there who think it's quite acceptable to slaughter an endangered animal for a trophy or for decorative purposes. Over a decade later, we're still debating this problem. It has taken too long to get here. I tell my honourable friend I wholeheartedly support him in bringing forward this important measure. I find that trophy hunting of endangered species is sickening, barbaric, and totally unacceptable. I'm also aware that the biggest threat to any private member's bill is the clock. It's all too easy to run out of time. So I'll conclude my remarks by saying, well done to my honourable friend. the member for East Antrim said we may need to do more. We may, he's right, but this is a good start. Let's get on with it.
Or for any more? No? Call the Minister, Trudy Harrison.
Thank you very much, Sir Mark. It really is a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship today. I would like to thank, as other honourable and right honourable members have, to pay my thanks to the member for Crawley, who has done a sterling job in bringing this bill forward, and for his work on conservation and animal welfare more generally. And I would also like to thank all of the honourable and right honourable members of this committee. There have been queries about how the government will support this. I will certainly, as the Minister now taking this bill forwards, be working with my colleague in the other place, Lord Benyon, and speak to all members across the House to ensure that this bill has the support it needs. And I would also like to pay tribute to the officials across DEFRA who I know have supported the Honourable Member for Crawley and myself and previous ministers in making progress with this bill. I will give way.
Thank the Minister for giving way. As has been mentioned, we've had quite a bit of lobbying from people that are involved in talking to the government about this issue, and they're basically saying, I think at one point they say that during the second reading, majority of what was said by members was factually incorrect. Can she confirm that she has very carefully, with her officials, considered the evidence and that she has looked at whether their arguments are valid, and she's come to the conclusion, as we all have, that this bill is the right thing to do?
I'd like to thank the member actually for the opportunity to do exactly that, because of course as a new minister taking up this responsibility, I have had detailed conversations with members and also with my officials who I believe to have done a diligent, highly professional job of assessing all of the evidence and supporting me and the member for Crawley in taking this bill forward. We're taking this decisive action, responding to the British public's concerns about trophy hunting abroad, and we're acting now to help protect some of the world's most iconic animals, including lions, rhinos, elephants and polar bears.
Will the Minister give way?
I will give way.
Can I thank the Minister for giving way? I'm very welcome that she pledged the support of the government for this. But the most crucial thing, as a fellow ex-Deputy Chief Whip, also mentioned, the member for East Yorkshire, Right Honourable Member for East Yorkshire, is about making sure that it has sufficient time, or in the event that there's unreasonable obstruction, will they look at a government carryover motion for this legislation?
I very much appreciate the advice of the experienced member, and all I can say at this stage is I very much look forward to a speedy third reading and very much hope that members across the House will support the progress that this bill really does need to make to secure royal assent. Yeah.
Can I pick up the point my honourable friend made? Because I've had information today which came from Dilys Rowe. She's a member of the UK Government Darwin Unit, and Professor Amy Dickman from Oxford University, who are in fact the figures that my honourable friend gave there about the information. 86% of the public would like the bill to become law. And she says, and they say, this is cherry-picked data, etc., etc. Surveyation and assessment by Surveyation found that only 40% of Britons surveyed would want a trophy hunting ban if it caused harm to people or wildlife. Now, I find that remarkable. We're getting that sort of information when, as far as I can see, the evidence is contrary to that. So it really would be important to sort of, in a sense, and I hope the Minister will agree with me, put paid to some of the points that are being made, which are claims of misinformation, which in themselves appear to be misinformation.
I will not be drawn into a conversation about that particular piece of information. But suffice to say, through the remainder of my comments, I hope I can address some of the points that members have raised today. And one of those points was whether this bill would apply to captive bred or so-called canned animals. And I can absolutely confirm, as the member for Crawley did, that this will apply. It will actually be one of the toughest import bans, covering thousands of species of conservation concern. and will not allow any exemptions. It will help strengthen animal protection and support long-term conservation outcomes. Our aim is to ensure that imports of hunting trophies to Great Britain are not putting additional pressure on already threatened species. And I am going to address the member for East Antrim's points about Northern Ireland later in my remarks. It's a clear signal of our commitment to conservation in line with our wider commitment to halt and reverse biodiversity loss. Around 1 million animal and plant species are threatened with extinction, many within decades, and the abundance, diversity and connectivity of species are declining faster than at any other time in human history. From 2011 to 2020, the UK recorded 731 imports of hunting trophies under CITES, and these include so-called trophies from elephants, hippos, lions, leopards, brown and black bears. Imports have come from South Africa, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Tanzania, Canada, Zambia, Namibia, Russia and the US, Botswana and a small number of others. Over 85% of the 44,000 responses to our consultation were in favour of further action. Opinion polling has shown similar levels of support for a ban amongst the British public. I think it was the member for East Antrim who also referenced what else are we doing internationally to support programmes aimed at conserving and restoring biodiversity. We are contributing to poverty reduction in developing countries and we're supporting local communities. And just to give an example, that these include £90 million for the Darwin Initiative and Darwin Plus to address biodiversity challenges and support those local communities. £30 million for action on illegal wildlife trade, and £100 million Biodiverse Landscapes Fund to work across 6 landscapes to protect and restore critical terrestrial ecosystems. So we are working internationally to address the concerns around biodiversity and restoring nature. Of course.
I'm grateful to the Minister giving way. I'm concerned that while body parts may not be the trophies that these bloodthirsty hunters bring into the UK, but it will be in the form of money because they will sell their kill to other traders across the world. What considerations has she had in bringing a moratorium of people being able to make proceeds out of the kill that they create?
Likewise, I share those concerns, and as the International Minister, I'm having detailed discussions with counterparts in subsequent months. I'm afraid I can't provide any further detail on that specific point, but I agree with her with the premise of what needs to be achieved internationally to truly make a difference to conserve endangered species. And an awful lot was achieved in the recent COP15, where my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State, attended, committing to protecting 30% of land and sea and a whole host of other targets and goals to preserve nature and biodiversity. Moving on towards the clauses. Clause 1 makes provision for the import prohibition and also defines a hunting trophy for the purposes of this ban. The prohibition without exemptions goes much further than our current licensing system in clamping down on these imports. We're sending a clear message, addressing the public's concerns and delivering our manifesto commitment. This ban will make sure that there is no possibility at all that imports to Great Britain could be putting the conservation of species abroad at risk. A ban is also practical to implement, avoiding the ambiguity about what cases might or might not be covered. The definition of a hunting trophy is drafted to maintain the effect of the current definition that is used for CITES controls. It will cover all items from trophy hunting. And this approach means that we will not inadvertently have knock-on effects on other forms of trade under CITES that aren't products from trophy hunting. Changing the definition could cause confusion about what is or isn't covered and disrupt other imports by businesses or individuals for other purposes like commercial trade in items. Moving to clause 2, we committed to ban imports of trophies from endangered animals, and that is exactly what this bill delivers. Altogether, this clause ensures that our approach will be comprehensive and properly clamp down on imports of trophies from endangered animals. Cross-referencing Annexes A and B of the Wildlife Trade Regulations, which implement Appendix 1 and 2 of CITES, means that the bill covers all animal species that had internationally agreed to be threatened or potentially threatened by international trade, including by imports of hunting trophies. There are thousands of species covered by the annexes. Covering all of these animals means that our policy is as clear and practical as possible, even though not all are trophy hunted. This is a clear and straightforward approach. There will be no imports of trophies from any Annex A or B species. This is what the public expect, and it's what this bill will deliver. The bill also includes a power to add further species to the scope of the ban in the subsection, to make sure nothing is missed and to make sure that trophy hunting pressure doesn't shift to target other endangered animals. At second reading, my honourable friend the Minister made clear that we will be using this power to list additional species of conservation concern that are targeted for trophies, such as the African buffalo and reindeer. We'll be looking at species with a conservation status of near threatened or worse, according to the IUCN Red List. And we'll publish this list of species for members' consideration before we table the instrument to list them. We'll be able to act swiftly to list any more species in future if their conservation status worsens or we see evidence of trophy hunting becoming a problem in such cases. Moving on to clause 3. Clause 3 sets out how a ban on imports to Great Britain will work and how it will deal with movements from Northern Ireland. By virtue, as I know my honourable friend, the member for East Antrim, understands, by virtue of the Northern Ireland Protocol, current CITES controls on hunting trophies as contained within EU legislation will remain in force, effectively maintaining the status quo. The member for York Central raised the concern about trophy hunters avoiding the ban by moving banned trophies through Northern Ireland. There is no backdoor for trophies to enter Great Britain. Clause 4 deals with the extent and commencement of the bill and sets out its short title.
Would the Minister
I will give way.
I'm very grateful to the Minister for giving way, and I had a further question in relation to Northern Ireland. Could the Minister explain to the committee what discussions she's had, if any, with the Government of the Irish Republic about this matter? Because clearly there's a lot of cross-border trade which could indeed, as my honourable friend mentioned, could inadvertently find its way into the UK, into Great Britain.
I thank the member. He will realise, as the relatively new minister to this particular post, that it is officials that have dealt with devolved administrations consulting how we can best ensure that the bill meets both the legal aims and also, importantly, the policy aims as well. And because this is a reserved matter, and I really do want to thank officials in the devolved administrations in Wales and Scotland in particular for their engagement with DEFRA. I will give way.
I'm grateful to the Minister giving way, and obviously there is concern about the increase that we may see in parts of the United Kingdom of this trade. And on 2 points, I just want to ask her, first of all, how she will be monitoring the effectiveness of this legislation, and if it is her intention to report back regularly to this House as to the impact that this legislation has had. And secondly, if it is still on the government's agenda to bring in the Animal Abroad Bill, and if so, whether she'll look at the tourism industry which is promoting this trade and seek to bring a ban for UK companies promoting hunting, which again could influence the effects of this bill.
Thank you very much. In terms of publishing, how effective this ban will be, I know that there will be a great deal of public interest and, of course, interest from members across this House to know that the ban has been successful. And that will also be important in encouraging other countries to follow suit. So we will be as transparent as we possibly can be. In terms of how effective the ban will be, and I think there was an earlier question about whether equipment would be required, extra equipment would be required for Border Force to undertake their work. That is not anticipated at this stage. Border Force are well versed, well experienced in dealing with imports, and we expect that we have the skills available in ports and airports to be able to undertake that work. I really must conclude by again paying tribute to my... Yes.
I'm grateful to her for giving way. Before she concludes her remarks, could she address, for the benefit of the committee, the point I raised earlier, that is the coming into force of parts 1 and 2 of the bill? Can she give us some hope that this will be done speedily, please?
She certainly can provide assurance that I will work with my counterparts across the Lords, with the Whip's offices, to make sure that we do everything we can to get this bill through all of the stages in both houses and secure royal assent, because we are taking decisive action on animal welfare, and I know that colleagues have a great interest in this agenda. We set out an ambitious programme of legislative and non-legislative animal welfare reforms in our action plan for animal welfare, which was published in May last year, May 2021. And we were also delivering on these commitments in this parliamentary session. I'm pleased to see that the shark fins bill, which we are supporting, has now been introduced to the other place, having completed its passage through the House. So we are making good progress in this area. Reiterating the government's full support for this important bill as it makes its way through Parliament, thanks to the Honourable Member for Crawley and Honourable and Right Honourable members of this committee who have done an excellent job diligently and been dedicated for the benefit of conservation abroad.
Thank you, Minister. I call Henry Smith.
Thank you very much, Sir Mark. And can I just conclude by expressing my sincere thanks to Honourable and Right Honourable members of this committee today for their supportive remarks. I quite remarkably, I think, agree with everything that was raised. I'd also like to thank those members who aren't here today who spoke at the second reading for their support. Can I also express my gratitude to the clerks in the Bill Office for all of the technical and logistical support that they have offered me, and also to the team in the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs for the support that they have given me, and the Government Whip's office as well. It was sadly in October 2021 that our dear late colleague Sir David Amos was murdered, and in that last week of his life this was an issue that he campaigned on, and I would like to dedicate this committee session to his memory and fine legacy. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith. The question is, the clause 1 stand part of the bill. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. With the leave of committee, I will put a single question on clauses 2 to 4 to stand part. The question is that clauses 2 to 4 stand part of the bill. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. The final question I must put is that I do report the bill to the House. The question is that I do report the bill to the House. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order. Thank you.
Room